I want to welcome this wonderful group of leaders who are presenting on Narratives Matter, Social Media and Stories as a Tool for Climate Action and Education. And thank you all for your vital work and leadership in this field. Narratives matter because they're just so deeply important in shaping how we personally and communities understand and engage with the climate crisis and the world around us, and how social media and stories are a powerful platform for amplifying not only narratives, but how we frame and understand this epic moment in time. And I think a lot of us have been in discussions about that the story we're in the big cultural context, is completely corrupted by the current systems of oppression. So what is the story we're in? What is the story we're building now? So the platforms that empower climate storytelling are also breeding grounds for, unfortunately, misinformation and disinformation, which can distort public understanding. They can delay policy action and often serve the interests of the fossil fuel lobbies, continuing with political structures that are very harmful, and climate denial networks. So we have a mixed situation here with these platforms that we're all engaged in. These false narratives can obscure the root causes of the crisis, such as colonialism, capitalism, and environmental racism, and marginalize the voices of frontline communities. And so in this context, the climate justice movement really needs to prioritize narrative interventions that confront these distortions, center historically excluded perspectives, and promote a just and real agenda rooted in equity, accountability, community-led solutions, and systemic change. So it's our time now to really grasp the narrative. And I know at WECAN we're doing a lot of work to have interventions on the collective narrative and what are solutions, what are false solutions, what are people doing on the ground. It's really time for our voices to be heard, which means stepping into this narrative conversation. And with that, I'm very honored to introduce our esteemed panelists for this discussion. We're going to be hearing from Wawa Gatharu, who is a climate activist and founder of Black Girl Environmentalist from the US. Then we'll be hearing from Priscila Tapajowara, who is Tapajo and president of Midia Indigena Association from Brazil. Then we'll be hearing from Vanessa Nakate, who's the director of TARD Foundation from Uganda. Then we'll be hearing from Laura Cook, who is the special projects lead from the Project Dandelion, and she's from the United Kingdom. And then we'll be hearing from Harriet Shugarman, who's the executive director of Climate Mama from the US. And then we'll have a special presentation, which we'll bring forward at the end of that. And so, yes, I'm so honored to have all of you here with the tremendous work you're doing. And I will hand the floor over to you, Wawa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Osprey. This is the logistics team again. I'm very sorry to share that we just heard from Wawa just a few moments while you were presenting, and she's no longer able to join us she's doing well, but just wanted to let you know that here.
Okay, thank you. Well, we sent her our best, and we will hand the floor to Priscila.
Hi, everyone. I'm Priscila. Just a second, I need to turn it off of my translation.
Good to see you, Priscila.
I'm sorry. Okay. Hi, thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you and Sherry. The work I have been doing in Brazil with Midia Indigena. I will speak Portuguese because my English is not really good. And
No,
I
that's
hope
okay. What I want to do is
okay?
just remind people to, if you'd like to hear in English or another language, just reminding people that there is a globe at the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side, and you can click to your preferred language. Just want to make sure people were set up for you. Please go ahead. Thank you for the interruption.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I speak in Portuguese now.
So we from Midia Indigena in these last 10 years, we've been doing a communication work that's very important in Brazil. 10 years ago, when we launched, we didn't have collectives, we didn't have communicators, and us youth, indigenous communicators, we didn't have anyone to inspire ourselves. So from these thoughts and the importance that we needed to occupy a new space, that we needed to use new tools for our fighting, so we could echo our work, our fights, our cultural diversity, we needed
We can hear you fine.
sorry, though I'm in a meeting of communicators that's happening here in Peru. So that's why everything's a little bit all in the air and there's a little bit of noise around me. So anyways, this work we've been developing, as I've mentioned, in these last 10 years to to empower more and more, not only the indigenous communicators, but especially our leaderships, because we saw that in Brazil, the media was monopolized, the large communication mediums, they didn't talk about our struggles. And when they talked about the indigenous peoples, they would speak in a very stereotypized way, and in a way that we didn't see ourselves, we didn't see that we were represented. So in these last years, we've been growing a lot, we've been strengthening more and more. So the indigenous communication in Brazil, it changed. Before we had few communicators, and today we have many, and we've mapped. Last week, we concluded this mapping, and today we work with 989 indigenous communicators that are spread in all of the 6 Brazilian biomes, in all the regions in the country. And we've been strengthening, helping the communities, echoing the struggles and the voice of the leaderships that are in the territories through this tool that is communication. Even more when we think from an indigenous perspective of what communication is. And communication isn't just a technological tool that we have access today. Indigenous communication has always been present for many, many, many years through our speech, through our storytelling, through our singing, through our dancing, through our culture, that also is a way of art, but it's a way of communication that we used to use. And through this communication, that still today we have many indigenous cultures that are lives with our languages and with our traditions. So today we use other tools, other technological tools that are modern, so we can empower ourselves and strengthen our struggle in defense of Mother Earth, in defense of our indigenous rights. So when we also think about a feminist perspective, a women perspective, when I myself started to work in communication, there wasn't a big representative of indigenous women in communications in Brazil. So this started to grow in the last few years. Many women also started to feel inspired by me, as I saw Graça Guarani, that is a filmmaker. And so we started to build a path, an open path. So the youth that today is strengthening their territories, they could see. And we have been more and more doing this type of work. So today, this year, Midia Indigena is completing 10 years of a journey that wasn't easy, but that we're still insisting and fighting for. And we also know that it's very difficult for us to get support so we can continue to sustain our collective, but we don't give up because we understand that this struggle isn't an individual struggle. It's a community, it's a communal struggle. It's a struggle that needs to continue to reach more and more people. And if it isn't us talking about ourselves, others will barely talk about us in a way that we want to be heard. So to be in these spaces, to use these new tools, yes, it's a way of struggling for the preservation of our territories, of our languages, of our cultural manifestations. Tell the world about our cultural diversity in the indigenous peoples all around the world. And in Brazil, in my region, there is already cultural diversity within the peoples. So to show this plurality of knowledge, of this ancestral knowledge that makes for years and years that we can see that we have been protecting and defending and keeping the forest standing and the rivers alive. So this knowledge, as my grandfather would always say, there's nothing more technological than nature. Nature is pure technology. She is our school. She teaches us about life, about respect, about care, about understanding and belonging. So from the moment that we start to learn, we know how to use these tools, understand it and use it. We also start to understand the rest of the world. We start to have a vision inside out, of a vision of belonging. We are all children of Mother Earth. We all belong to Mother Earth. So we need to occupy these new spaces. And looking towards COP, we've been doing several projects. The House Maraca, that will be the first indigenous house during COP, where we're going to use communication and art to echo more and more the struggles of the indigenous peoples, showing that us indigenous peoples, we are, yes, indeed, the solutions to climate change, and we cannot think about a future without thinking and without including the indigenous peoples and local communities in these debates and in these spaces of decision making. And we're bringing our culture, we're bringing our cultural diversity, our dance, our art, to strengthen and breaking the stereotypes and bringing more people to come and fight with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Priscila. And I'm really excited to hear about all of your work, and also what you're going to be doing at COP is really amazing. It's going to be quite an important space that you're creating. Thank you so much for your work. And now I would like to hand the floor over to Vanessa.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me on this panel. Actually, I came in this conversation thinking about how social media can be used to advance climate action. But after hearing Priscila speak, she has reminded me of something, that communication is way more than the technology that we know right now. It has always been, embedded in stories, in poems, in, proverbs. And that is something that I also grew up, seeing. Like, there was so much knowledge and wisdom that was passed on from grandmothers and mothers through these conversations. And it's so easy to disconnect from that, but I'm really grateful that Priscila has talked about it. It has reminded me of the different things that I learned from my elders through their stories and through their proverbs. And when it comes to the issue of narratives, I do believe that, in order to move forward in the conversations of climate, we really have to own the narratives, especially for the people that are on the front lines of the climate crisis. When we look at, the salience of this issue, for me, it really starts from people talking about it, people creating awareness about it, and getting leaders to do something about it. And for me, that was in a way my story. When I started my activism in 2019, I started by organizing climate strikes after being inspired by Greta Thunberg. And at that time, of course, the climate strikes were, they were really small strikes, but I would take pictures and share them on social media. And I saw how the more I shared my work on social media, the more it reached different people and different audiences. And it introduced me in a way to people like, Laura Cook, President Mary Robinson. So I can say that social media really helped advance my work in climate justice, because it helped tell the story and amplify the story of what was happening in my country, Uganda, what was happening across the African continent, and what our demands were. It wasn't so, it was never easy for people from communities like ours, to find ourselves in halls of the United Nations talking about climate issues. But it was through, social media that we were able to reach the audience that kept on introducing us to different people. I remember when I got my very first invitation to a UN Youth Climate Summit, I actually asked why I had been invited. This was about 9 months later, into my activism. And the lady who sent me the invitation told me that she and the team were monitoring my work for about 6 months on social media. So I was doing my activism and sharing everything on my Twitter account at that time, and I didn't know that there were people watching. I knew there were people who would share my posts, but I didn't know that the people that would, lead me to be invited to the UN Youth Climate Summit and many other summits after that were following what I was sharing. And it really helped amplify, the story that I was telling and the stories of my communities. I've always believed that, every environmental defender has a story to tell, and every story has a solution to give, and every solution has a life to change. But it really starts from telling the story, being able to tell the story. If you do not tell your story, someone else tells it for you. And when someone else tells it for you, it means that they're going to say it wrong. It means that, they're going to share information that is not true. So for me, my work in activism has always really emphasized the need to amplify the stories of those that are on the front lines of climate change. You know, you cannot be in a room. I think there have been so many rooms where solutions are being discussed for people that as, in vulnerable communities, and yet those people are not there, which I find very problematic. And sometimes it's because of the challenges that people face to access these spaces. When you talk about language justice, when you talk about accreditation, funding, the visa processes, they really make it hard to access these places. But when we have tools like social media, they help us tell our stories. They help us tell the narrative. No one is going to own our story if we share it on social media. So that is why I think it's really important that for people that are organizing to really take advantage of these tools, because they help us reach more people, they help us amplify the story, and also they help, social media helps create this kind of global community. And I think for many people in the climate space, it almost feels like we are in this global family. And you find yourself, if you're at the Africa Climate Week or London Climate Week or New York Climate Week, it's like this community of people that you have seen through social media and worked with through social media, and then you get to see them in person. But usually these conversations start through social media. So I've really seen how it has helped. It has helped us create the narratives of access, first of all, access to climate justice, access to equity, access to sustainability. It has also helped amplify our narratives for protection. Because when we are talking about climate issues, we are talking about protection. The climate crisis is not only devastating communities, but it is leading to the loss of lives, it is leading to the loss of livelihoods. So when we tell these narratives are for, access to justice and also protection of those that are on the front lines of the climate crisis, those that deserve to tell their own stories. And as we tell these stories, in a way, it puts public pressure on leaders, and I think I've seen it when global movements come together and they are working on a specific campaign. You will find a leader is forced to take a decision, is forced, to say something about the issue that you are talking about, and the media picks it up as well. And I mean, in the end, I just see this is all like a chain that eventually leads to policy making. Policy making may not happen, it's like a chain of activities that lead to that. The media has a role to play, leaders have a role to play, but the public, we have the biggest role because we create the awareness, we create the narrative, we tell the story, we amplify the story, and we have to use all the tools that we have. If you can use some of the tools that Priscila has talked about, the tools that have been embedded in culture through poems and songs and proverbs, those are tools that can be used. If you can use social media, that is a tool that you can use. I think that as a global community, we can find a way to tell the story. We just have to always know that every person that is on the front lines of the climate crisis, they deserve to tell their own story because their story has lives to change. I usually talk about how climate change affects so many people on the African continent. But I also acknowledge that I do not know the exact, the full experiences of people that are, in countries like Kenya, because I do not live there. I have been there, but I don't live there. People that live in maybe Nigeria, I may see the news saying, 500,000 people have been displaced by floods, and my work is to amplify that. But then if I don't share a platform, if I don't talk about the need to have an activist from Nigeria tell their own story, that means I also contribute to that problem. So it's really important that, if we are having discussions on the climate crisis in Nigeria, we have communities from Nigeria. If you're talking about Uganda, we have communities from Uganda because those people carry the experiences, those people carry their stories. And finally, I think my final thing is, even as we talk about the importance of social media, we really have to also think about the challenges that come with it and the need to push for more protection on social media, especially protection of environmental defenders. Maybe this is something that I can come into in the later discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for your analysis and how you're approaching narrative. And also, I just really want to acknowledge your incredible leadership because I know many, many young women that we work with really look to you and have followed you, and the way that you have included people in your discourse, as you said, amplifying other stories, but also speaking out with your own voice. It's been really important to the climate justice movement for everyone, and I know especially for the youth, but for all of us. And I just really want to thank you and applaud your leadership it's really needed, and your voice is really having an impact. So thank you for that. And now I'd like to hand the floor over to Laura. Laura Cook.
Thank you, Osprey. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was going to say it's not just young women, Vanessa, older women as well. Those of us who are not young anymore. Hello, everybody. I wanted to speak today about narratives and about the stories behind the tools. And I wanted to start with a quote from Ben Okri, the amazing author and poet, who once said, "Some people say when we are born, we're born into stories. I say we're also born from stories." And as Priscilla said earlier, so many Indigenous cultures have always had stories at their heart. This isn't something new we're speaking about today. We are stories. And I think when we're speaking about the radical transformation that's needed in this era, in this Anthropocene era that we're in, we can't do that unless we're also speaking about the capacity we have to dream new stories and to become new stories. And that's the invitation that I wanted to come with today as part of this WECAN assembly. And I wanted to offer it because I think as women, we're often the keeper of stories. We're often the custodians of histories as well, and the creators of futures. But I also wanted to be clear that stories are not inherently positive. Anyone who's ever watched a really scary horror movie knows that stories are not always positive. And as Osprey said earlier, we only need to look at the world now to know this to be the case. We look at our news screens and we see new horrors daily. We have been witness to, and we continue to witness these terrible stories being spun in real time, stories of extraction and exploitation and domination and unfolding genocide and colonialism and fear, and stories that are violent both to people and nature and people as part of nature. And those stories have become normalized, which I think is one of the most dangerous things about the times that we're living in right now. And these stories don't serve life. These stories are corrupted stories. We also increasingly are seeing these false stories, lies. Let's put it bluntly, lies that are told through misinformation and disinformation. And we must not kid ourselves into thinking those are accidental bits of mistruth. These are stories that are being spun very purposefully by those that are funding what harms us. But we have an opportunity, I think, in this moment as well, to choose what we give our time to, which stories we choose to give our time to, and which stories we choose to amplify, which ones we listen to and which ones we make room for. And I wasn't 100% sure initially, I'll be honest, Osprey, whether I should take this speaking slot or not, because as you know, and as Vanessa knows, and anyone else who knows me watching this, I'm a pretty behind the scenes person. I'm not normally someone who comes on panels. And one of the reasons I was hesitant about this is, as a white woman, I honestly think white women need to make more space too, for people to be telling the right stories, for people like Priscilla and Vanessa, who have just spoken so articulately and beautifully, but also for those whose names we don't know as well. But I accepted the invite for two reasons, well, three. The third is because Osprey's great, but also because I think out of our privilege, sometimes we need to speak up. And right now we're in a time where actually people are starting to stop speaking. They're starting to silence themselves out of fear. And I think the silence is dangerous. And those of us with privilege maybe have more ability sometimes to speak up without fear. Secondly, because I want to encourage all of us that our stories matter, including my own. As Vanessa said, we need to use the tools that we have. And I think at the heart of it, the tool we all have is ourselves, our voice, and those stories that we own. I'm a poet. I've been using my poetry where I can, but I wanted to try and offer this tonight as well, or today or this morning, wherever you are. And all of our stories do matter. I'm sat with these fellow women in conversation who are living, breathing stories. Harriet, Priscilla, Vanessa, Osprey, you are beautiful stories. Vanessa, I've seen you grow into the most marvelous woman, and the work that you do is incredible. For anyone that just thinks Vanessa says nice words on panels like this one, I've seen her work in Uganda. I've seen her in action. She is service-hearted and she's amazing. And part of her story has interwoven with my own, and I'm the better for it. And I imagine for any of us listening to me today, we can all think of people in our lives that have interwoven with us their stories, and that we are better for it, and that's what drives us on. And this is it. Stories are not static things. They evolve, they grow, and we can build entire worlds out of them. And we do. And sometimes when I see the state of things in the world as they are, I find myself wondering, would nature just be better if there were no humans? But I do think humans have one critical thing in our favor, and that's this aptitude we have for dreaming new worlds, and not only dreaming them, but becoming them. And right now we need better dreams. We really need dreams that are rooted in care and in courage. We need dreams of regeneration. We need dreams of repair. We need dreams that are brave, brave dreams that we're bold enough to bring into being. And we need new symbols. I'm wearing this dandelion, and I know there's some dandelions already I've seen taking part this week. The dandelion is a strange symbol. In many places, it's a weed. It's seen as a nuisance, a flower, a beautiful flower, but that many gardeners try and get rid of. But it's resilient, it's healing, and it's good for biodiversity. But the thing I wanted to pick up on today is dandelions grow in the cracks. They grow in the crevices. They grow anyway. And to me, that's the symbol that we need in this time. We need to be like dandelions, unafraid to grow in the fractures of the broken systems that we have been speaking about as part of this assembly, willing to bring healing, ready to let go of the things that we shouldn't carry forward, to be rooted in care and to be light and able to move easily. It's a symbol of unity. So if you don't know what I'm talking about with Project Dandelion, please go on projectdandelion.com and find out more. It's a very non-exclusive club. We want everybody. And Project Dandelion to me is part of this bigger story we need to tell, that we are in the majority. A climate and nature crisis. Up until now, this crisis has been marked by injustice and inequality. It's been a really dark, very, very depressing narrative, but we're not done yet. I'm joining today from London Climate Week in the UK, a very warm London Climate Week. And this morning I had the privilege of observing the very first of the global ethical stock takes that the Brazil COP30 presidency, an initiative spearheaded by Marina Silva in the lead up to COP30, has begun, and that began today in London. This Friday, I'm helping lead a civil society version of the same thing. And these ethical stock takes I wanted to just touch on today, because they're not about policy or technical solutions. They're about pausing to reflect on the cultural and the moral and the spiritual dimensions of the climate and nature crisis, because it's not just a crisis of emissions or biodiversity loss. It's a crisis of imagination. It's a crisis of disconnection. And I think ultimately it's a crisis where we've sometimes pushed those things that really matter to us as human beings, so far to the margins that it even feels uncomfortable to name them. But it's a crisis of belonging. That's what this is. It's a crisis of belonging. And this morning during one of the coffee breaks, which is always where the best things happen, I found myself in conversation with a group of women, and one of them said, what will be the output of all of this, of these global ethical stock takes? And then someone really gently offered, maybe this isn't about outputs. And I loved it, because I thought, what if actually the COP30 presidency are offering something different, something deeper, a shift in the atmosphere, a rekindling of possibility, and a collective reimagining of how things can be. And don't get me wrong, COP30 is not going to be perfect. COPs are never perfect, and nor will these global ethical stocktakes be perfect, because we're humans and these things are always going to be imperfect just by nature of us. But I think instead of us being really cynical, which can be so easy to do, and I've done it myself, I think, what if we ask that question of how can we support this move at the moment, mainly women-led, to try and get behind these things like the global ethical stock takes, but maybe do more than that, create our own in our communities. We've got so many communities represented here where we just spring up and start talking about these things, start talking about stories and the better story that we can tell. Project Dandelion is holding this informal version of the ethical stocktake on Friday, and we are going to open source share the toolkit afterwards so that anyone that wants to use that and have a conversation of their own in their community can do so. I wanted to just finish by maybe where I began, which is how most good stories end, which is just this invitation, I think, to us all today to dream, because we're not done yet and we're still writing this story. And in this unfinished moment, we have choices to make. We can still dream better dreams. We can still build better worlds. And I honestly believe we can still become the kind of story that future generations will want to tell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Really inspiring presentation, and really loved you bringing forward to us, how we are all stories and how important it is that we tell our stories, but also, the broader context of this moment. I really appreciate it. And earlier, actually, on one of the panels, we've talked about the ethical stocktake and the launch of that during London Climate Week. And I think it's very interesting. I think it's about narrative. I think it's about trying to find an intervention that can't fit into the political policy landscape, and really humanizing this effort around climate justice and how we're going to resolve what is really a poly crisis, not just a climate crisis. So, we're very interested in WECAN in this ethical stocktake. Look forward to talking to you about it later. But I think it has some really interesting potential, as long as we can really ensure that that influences the negotiations. And I think that'll be a really important thing we can do as civil society. So thank you for that. And now I would like to hand the floor to Harriet Shugarman. Welcome. So good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Osprey. It's such an honor to be here. And thank you, Priscilla, Vanessa, and Laura. I am honored to share time with you today. And I'm learning so much from each of you. And to the incredible women who've already shared their wisdom over the past 2 days. One message that I heard often in many of the presentations and panels was how our children's future and now figures prominently in so much of what we do. And so these are stories that I'm thrilled to continue as I share the work of Our Kids Climate, where I am the chair of the advisory council. And I am in particular want to highlight today how we bring narrative center stage and successfully also use social media to share the individual as well as the collective work and journeys of feminists, mamas, elders, carers, aunties, and parents who, from their own corners of the globe, show us how an intergenerational approach is moving climate action and policy, both in big places like the COPs and global forums, but also locally. And so these actions that we learn and then share are rooted deeply in justice and equity. They build a transformative past. They talk about true systemic change and how to create a healthy and a just world. So today, I'd like to share through examples some of the campaigns and communication tools that we've used to help raise up and amplify the voices and the work in our network, where the heart is central to moving the mind, to educating across societal bounds, and to demand real and sustained action and results. So our work is with climate parent organizations from around the globe. And what we discovered too is there's so many similarities in the kinds of solutions that are being created and implemented. And we see a role for a networked organization like OKC to amplify that work, so people can speak in their own voices, as Vanessa was sharing with us, and to also remind that we don't need to start from the beginning each time, but we can build and learn from the ideas and successes that are already in motion. Next slide, please. So I know this is intuitive to many of us in the movement and through our stories, how the power of fierce love, the power for our children, for future generations, moves us and moves us forward and drives actually that climate action. But we're seeing more and more actual research and studies in this way too. And so just to quickly share this study that came out that talked to 60,000 people in 23 different countries. And the number one driver of why people wanted climate action was care for the planet, for future generations. Next slide, please. So we use narratives in Our Kids Climate from mamas we help share their stories from all over the world. We use our website, we have a newsletter, we have a fellowship program where we bring cohorts of people together to learn from each other, to learn how to use the tools of social media, to how to share their ideas, their work, their stories, their narratives in their own towns and cities, and then also global networks as well. And we find that then that brings in the media, both legacy and others who reach out, who want to then hear in their own words these stories from around the world. Next slide, please. So just a little background about Our Kids Climate, which was birthed at a COP in Paris, where we presented to the world leaders and the UN a petition from parents from around the globe who are demanding action on behalf of their children on climate. We then reestablished again at the United Nations in 2019. And some of these pictures that you see here are from some of those campaigns. An early campaign, we were talking about our Mother Earth, and you see the little girl holding on to her mother and the picture beside it. And this started in 21 with illustrators, actually professional illustrators who gave their time, as well as children, community groups, faith-based groups who shared their images of our other mother. And we continue with that hashtag, and with we develop postcards, art displays, and they're shown locally and used around the world to share that narrative. And at the same time, we started the stories on our website, which is where you hear from mothers, from parent groups from around the world, from individuals sharing their stories on their work and what they're doing. And that was the first year we took delegations of mamas, global mothers from the global south to COP, so they could be there speaking truth to power, having their voices heard directly. And that continued for the next few COPs. After that, we developed film under the hashtag Kids First, and it was children's voices from around the world, and demanding that our leaders making those decisions put children first in their mind and their policies. And that followed in 23 with a report from the IPCC that looked at this Born Today, what would happen to a child if we took no action, if we took action, if we accelerated action. So we highlighted that and used that moment to raise up the voices and demand that look again at our children. In 24, at the Summit of the Future, we presented a letter from parents from around the world demanding action. around the hashtag protect what we love. So again, using social media in different ways to share the narratives. And this year, actually at the World Health Organization Summit on Clean Air in Cartagena, we brought together a group of mothers and to share Our Kids Air campaign, and that continues as well. And many of these mix and come together. So these narratives, these campaigns, we have a short video that was developed that's evergreen, that can be shared with others on how our children and the fossil fuel burdened air they're breathing stays with them for the rest of their lives and impacts them. So these narratives, these stories are so important to tell. Next slide. Who are our collaborators and the audiences we're trying to reach and trying to share with, not just at the COP, but broadly, and it's growing. We're so happy. I'm so happy to bring our narratives and stories here to the Assembly. Osprey, thank you so much for making room for the voices from Our Kids Climate and for being able to share these strong stories again from around the world. And I pass it back to you, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Harriet, for your dedication to really bringing forward the voice of the youth and caring for the youth and what they're experiencing and making space for that. And the parents, it's really important. So thank you so much for that outreach you're doing. I would like to take the opportunity now to give everyone a chance to have some closing remarks. If people could just keep it to like a minute or two, that would be good, because we do have another panel. So I want to be just really mindful, like literally like a minute or two. I know that Vanessa, you also wanted to comment on land defenders, and you were going to kind of bring that into the discussion part. So perhaps you could share that with us. But we'll start with you, Priscilla. If you'd like to sort of have some reflections from this panel or a closing remark, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
So I think that everything that was spoken here in this panel, it's very inspiring for me too, because we see that it's really important that us women are united and we're using these other means, these other platforms, these other spaces for us to strengthen ourselves and to strengthen each other's struggles and each other's fighting. Because when we talk about this fight in defense of Mother Earth, that it's a collective fight, these aspects that we are talking to use the tools to strengthen more and more each other's struggles, because the fight to defend Mother Earth, it shouldn't be an individual fight. It should be a collective and humanitarian fight. All of us, we depend on Mother Earth, and if we all suffer the consequences. So this is why us Indigenous peoples, we've been occupying these different spaces. We are learning new languages. We are learning new tools. We are going into spaces of politics and going into more and more spaces so we can echo our fight and to reforest the minds and the hearts of people. So more and more people around the world can be sensibilized by the understanding that the fight for Mother Earth, it has to happen now, because there's no planet B. We don't have a future if we don't fight for the present. And as women, as youth, we have this role to bring this ancestral knowledge so we can strengthen and denouncing the environmental crimes, the humanitarian crimes that have been happening in the world. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. I really appreciate your comments, and we really need to focus on these issues. Thank you so much. And I'll now hand the floor to Vanessa.
Yeah, thank you so much, Osprey. I think I'll just use my time to talk about the impact of social media, but also that which is negative, especially the on environmental defenders. I think that most social media spaces are becoming very polarized. And as a result, there is so much trolling and abuse on environmental defenders in these spaces, especially young environmental defenders. It's even much worse for young women, and it's very much worse for young Black women, young Indigenous women. So I think there is a huge place for us to seek accountability from big tech, because as much as social media has played a big role in helping us further our narratives and amplify them, it's also becoming a really toxic and, dangerous place for so many environmental defenders and scientists as well. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. I think that, we're talking about reclaiming the narrative. It's one thing for us to be telling our stories, which we need to do and taking up space, but we also need to protect the storytellers. We always say, with land defenders, we need to defend the defenders. Well, I think it's also happening more and more as our rights for free speech are being silenced and threatened, that we also need to stand up for each other in the public forums, and to be able to protect one another for free speech and to protect those speaking out. And I think we're going to see more of this. So I think this is just the beginning of a very critical conversation and action. And with that, we'd love to hear some closing comments from you, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a moment for the collective and really radical coming together as human beings and as storytellers, because we're all storytellers. I think it's about knowing when we need to step out the way. I think it's also, to that last point, knowing when we might need to speak up if we have got the privilege to be able to do so safely, and to be able to look after others in this time. But I think more than anything else, we need to remember that there is power in that collective story that we tell together. I think the opposite story, the kind of stories I spoke about earlier, the negative ones, the horrible ones, the terrible ones, we can't let that story drown out the possibility of what could be. And it's not just trite or kind of fluffy dream speak. It's also the reality that we're living in, that stories make things happen. So I think we need to come together, definitely take care of each other, especially those who face the most risks, but also not be afraid to build this story together, because we desperately, desperately need it.
Thank you. And we give the final word to you, Harriet.
Thank you, Osprey. And I think so much of what the panel was about was brought together by everyone in their final comments now. And I think you started with this warning about false narratives, which we are seeing and hearing play out, where people are hearing those false narratives and the world is being turned upside down, and what is needed and what is actually being expected by some. And so the importance of having people speak for themselves, of holding that space, of this forum that you've created that then will live on, to people being able to hear from land defenders, from activists, from people in their own words sharing their stories, is so critical. So thank you, and to the WECAN team, for creating this beautiful and important forum, and for us to find ways to uplift the true narratives and call those out, or just push to the side so much of what is false. And it is, as Vanessa said, social media is tricky, right? It's good and it's can be terrible. So again, uplifting as in spaces like this, and then sharing is critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harriet. And I really want to congratulate all of the presenters. This was a really interesting and important conversation. I feel we could go on for a couple of hours and dig into it more, as always is in these spaces. So, please continue on in the chat, and also just reminding people that there is a WhatsApp group forming from this assembly, and we can put that link in the chat so some of these conversations can continue for those who want to explore more on these themes. And yeah, just really, really appreciate the wisdom that you're all carrying as we work to transform our stories. There's so much to be said there. Before we go to the next panel, we just have a short little presentation that we want to offer from Aparna Packer, who is the Women Speak Coordinator at WECAN. And we want to share this resource with all of you since we're having this topic about shifting the narrative. And in fact, it's one of the big reasons that we're holding this global assembly, is because this is like a giant narrative intervention at this moment from many, many different perspectives to really create a different space, not only around what we're going to do about the climate crisis, but society and the poly crisis that we face collectively. It's an intervention to bring forward a different story, to hear from people who we don't usually hear from, and to be clear that what governments and financial institutions and corporations are offering as solutions are in fact not the way forward that many of us see. So this is our space, and I'm glad people are taking up space and using this to share their work. And with that, Aparna, would you please come on and share your work, and then we'll move to the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and for your words, Osprey. So I'm Aparna. I'm the current coordinator and a former researcher for WECAN's Women Speak program. And so as we know, women are impacted first and worst by climate change, yet are simultaneously essential actors in local and global solutions. Yet in spite of this, in the media, only 15% of the coverage on climate change includes women's perspectives, which is why WECAN's project, Women Speak, Stories, Case Studies, and Solutions from the Front Lines of Climate Change seeks to change this. Women Speak is a web-based research database that is designed to shift the current narrative and challenge dominant systems of exploitation and oppression of women and the earth, as we collect and share stories by and about women who are leading struggles and solutions for climate justice. The database currently covers 14 categories, which include justice across movements, climate policy, forest protection, new economics, fossil fuel resistance, women land defenders, and many more topics. The stories and solutions that are included in this project are fundamentally rooted in a climate justice framework with a feminist lens, and they are meant to provide a vision towards a just transition towards a clean energy future, respect for our living earth, and justice for all peoples. And the goal is to offer an accessible and ever-growing source of information, research, and multimedia storytelling for frontline earth defenders, policymakers, journalists, activists, educators, students, and all those who are seeking to understand and to demonstrate why and how women are paramount to just action on climate change and to the defense and protection of the web of life itself. The database currently has thousands of stories from women in action in the database, so please feel welcome to take a look at that. And please know also that Women Speak is maintained through the hard work and care of researchers from around the world, and WECAN also offers Women Speak internships every 6 months for those who are interested in contributing to this work. The database itself can be accessed through WECAN's website, and I will also drop the link in the Zoom tab below. But thank you all so much for your time and for being here, and thank you, Osprey. I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Aparna, and we're so honored to have you on our team, and thank you so much for sharing with us your important work. And this will close this session on narrative. Again, thank you to all the amazing leaders who joined us for this session, and we look forward to being with you as we go forward and creating stories for COP30 and beyond. Thank you so much.